Welcome back to Leeds Lately. Today's video is going to be about the Leeds United stadium update, but also some stuff about transfers, what happened in the window, and all that sort of thing as well with Red Bull, all these sorts of things to come. Make sure you hit that big red button down below before we get into it. And yes, it is going to be about that. Now, it's come from the Square Ball interview with Angus Kinnear, so I urge you, I am obviously picking out some key points from this and talking about it, so if you want to see it in much more detail, go ahead and go to the Square Ball channel on YouTube or on Spotify and listen to that Angus Kinnear interview in full. I've just picked out some key talking points that I would like to mention, because it's interesting, is because it's a little bit of an update about some behind-the-scenes stuff that you might not usually get to see with Leeds United. So the first thing is, and I'm going to mention this one quickly in passing, is just that they asked him about the Square Ball. That's Dan and Michael asked Angus about RB Leeds. Will Leeds ever become Red Bull Leeds? And Angus said categorically there is nothing in any contract at the moment that would say that they could ever have any naming rights, and also that they could ever actually become majority shareholders in the club. Now, he did say that if there ever comes a time where Leeds United are being renamed to RB Leeds, Red Bull Leeds, whatever it may be, that he would not be there. So essentially, he said he will resign if they ever call it RB Leeds. Not that that really makes a difference, because he would resign and they would still call it RB Leeds, but he's kind of committed to doing everything he can to not let that happen whilst he's at the club. Just want to mention Michael's joke when they were talking about that. They said about their relationship with Red Bull and things like that, and Michael's like, "Oh yeah, well, of course you've met them before in court," which I thought was a very good joke, very good joke considering all the Jean-Kevin Augustin dealings. But let's move on to some more positive things. We've got a number on the amount of seats that the stadium would be expanded to. Angus Kinnear saying that the stadium would become a 53,000 seater. Before that, we were kind of unsure whether it'd be a 50,000, 60,000, 55,000. Apparently 53,000 is pretty much the number that they're aiming for. When they're talking about these seats, they're talking about kind of the split of them, and obviously the concern was raised by Dan that there could be a large amount of corporate seats and not actually many extra seats will become available to those on the season ticket waiting list. Angus said that some of them will be corporate, but a lot of them will be GA, as in general admission, but he didn't give any specific numbers on that, so that's one to keep an eye on. Like, if somebody doesn't give specific numbers on something like that, it's usually because potentially there's two reasons. They don't know yet, because they haven't figured it out quite, the arrangement of seats, or they don't want to tell people because they feel like it will be a bit of an uproar and they'll kick up a fuss. Hopefully it's number one. But they did mention the season ticket waiting list and said how people basically do not know where they are on the list. And Angus said, well, yeah, we don't want people getting annoyed if they were in 27th and somebody in 35th got their season ticket based on where they are in the ground and all that sort of thing and what comes up available, which I get, but still, if you could just explain that to people, if they email in and say, look, I was 27th on the list, this person's 35th, and I've just seen that they've got in, then you say, okay, well, that was because you didn't apply for that part of the ground or whatever. So I think that's kind of fair, but it would be good for people to be able to see where they are in that list. And I think he did say that they would go ahead and have a look at that. Like I said, there's no real numbers on the seating in terms of what will be corporate and what will be general admission. But they did say that there'd been moves that had been started to make on this, and that the 49ers have agreed a multi-million pound fee for the redevelopment of the stadium. So nothing in terms of actual numbers that we can know, but apparently they have set aside a certain budget for this and said this is what's being spent on the stadium at minimum, because obviously that can change when unpredictable things come up and they say, okay, well, actually, no, all these structural beams need replacing, for example, so we've got to do that as well, and it could be unforeseen costs, but they've put down, apparently, a budget set aside for a minimum cost that they will be willing to spend on this stadium. And apparently the moves has been started to make on it. They started consulting with architects, mechanical engineers, environmental agencies to make sure that everything is within regulation. So it looks like the ball is rolling on that. And I think the trigger being pulled is probably us getting back to the Premier League. I would imagine that if we'd have got back to the Premier League at the end of last season, we would have been pulling the trigger on that stadium redevelopment already, and it would have been happening probably over the course of this summer, if not next. So I would imagine that it probably would happen if we do go up this season. Just on the stadium, obviously it's something that will bring in a lot of revenue, something that'll be really good for everyone, but until we actually see spades in the ground and see stuff start happening, it does seem like, obviously I made a video a couple of years ago, my highest viewed ever video, I think it's got over 50k views, and it was the last time Angus talked about this, and this was a good few years ago when we were back in the Premier League, and obviously I think he said another year in the Premier League and we'll do it, and we got relegated and all this stuff has kind of put everything off. But yeah, we need to see something a little bit more kind of concrete. Like, you know, Everton had the renderings and stuff come out. That would give us something to go, okay, this might be a little bit like what it looks like. Give fans a little bit something to get excited about. We just need a shred of something. So that's kind of the update on the stadium. When we come on to the players, now we're going to come on to the transfer window. He mentioned how the Leeds obviously had to sell 2 players to meet profit and sustainability rules, and he believes it was Angus, that is a B+ window overall. I mean, to be honest, it comes down to a similar thing for me in terms of I rated it a 6 out of 10, I think, which is probably a B, a C plus maybe if you're ranking it on that system. But I think, yeah, what my opinion was on this whole thing was that we got back to a position that we were already in, which is kind of what we wanted to do, because we obviously already had a good squad last year. And I think now that with the signings that we've made, we've kind of got back to the standard that we were at before, rather than improving it particularly. And I think if we'd have bought a number 10 in as well, we would have improved it. Now, we made the case that, cliche however it is, that Brendan Aronson is basically like a new signing, which, yeah, he does come back in, he does offer us something that we've not had in the Championship, and he is a good number 10, but the lads on the square ball, Michael and Dan, mentioned it would be nice to have a number 10 on the bench who can do that job as well. Somebody like Elland Cabal. Now, we mentioned that there was just nobody available that was better than what we had, and I think somebody like Elland Cabal is a no-brainer for me. He wasn't that much money. He could sit on the bench or start and would be excellent either way. I don't buy that they're looking at it and going, no, there's nobody better than Brendan Aronson for that price. Well, obviously not, because Brendan Aronson cost £20 million, but you need to look at people who, like Elland Cabal, have been maybe having a little bit of a revival in their career, and they're on an upwards trajectory at the moment, whether it be when he's 26 rather than when he's 22, 23. So it's just like there is players to be had across Europe that can provide you with that kind of that role in the number 10, who don't necessarily have to be millions and millions of pounds. There are options there which are shrewd and clever bargains. So I disagree on that one. He talked a little bit about not necessarily player power that I've put down in my notes here, but players not wanting to come to the Championship because, and he makes the point that basically if you're in the Premier League, you're in, or especially if you're in the top 15, 10 of the Premier League, you're in the top 10, 15 clubs in the world that a player would want to come to because you're in the Premier League. Then you take into consideration how big of a club Leeds is against somebody like a Bournemouth, for example, and how much more money we could spend. We would be a really, really attractive prospect were we in the Premier League. But what you've got to remember is that we've gone down to the Championship, and he said, well, now that makes you less attractive than all of the top 5 leagues. So you've gone from the top 10, 15 most attractive clubs to come to in the world to down to like 100 and something, because all those leagues are now above you. Even, I would say, the Portuguese league and the Dutch league, things like that. I would imagine that some of those leagues are probably more desirable than coming to the Championship. And they tried to get number 10s in the form of Buendia and Hamer. They went for Buendia. Buendia is someone that we maybe should have gone for 5 years ago. Buendia is not somebody you're going to be able to get now. He's not willing. Apparently, it was an instant. I'm not willing to play in the Championship again. I've kind of done my time there. So they moved on from that and went to Hamer. Apparently, the reason. Okay, so there was a lot of stuff going around social media about Hamer when we tried to get him. So according to Angus Kinnear, there's a little bit of an ownership change within Sheffield United, which then makes it difficult to get in contact with anyone in particular and say, look, is this player available? So the only way to find out is to put a bid in. So they put a bid in, and Sheffield United saying, we're not selling Hamer under any circumstances, and especially not to you, basically, to Leeds. So that's why they then just left it. And I'm inferring from context and reading between the lines here that everything after that, in terms of rumours of Leeds putting a bid in for Joel Peru, as in like for Hamer that included Joel Peru or any other kind of raised bids, was just nonsense, a complete nonsense made up by God knows who. So there's a difference, though, I think, between ambition and realism, because ambition is going for players like, who did we go for? Jonathan Rowe. I would say that's ambition, getting somebody who could potentially be on his way to a Premier League move or a higher move, somebody who you think, let's get them before they get that move to the Premier League or whatever. So I think that's ambition. I think unrealistic expectations is Buendia and Hamer. I think that's silly. I don't understand that, because obviously, yeah, they'd be brilliant for us, but they just do not fit the bill in terms of how much they would be worth and whether they would come and play in the Championship. So I think that was kind of crazy to go in for those, especially Buendia, that is. He also made mention of wanting to get the balance right with like career trajectory of players. So they didn't want somebody they basically identified that they wanted to deliberately raise the overall age of the squad, because from last season we were basically relying on 4 or 5 18 to 21-year-olds to try and carry us over the line in the playoffs and throughout the season as well, when realistically you can't be expected to do that because these players do not have the experience for it. So we wanted to, or the club wanted to, raise the age basically of the squad, and I think they wanted to try and identify players who were not too young, not too old, and were kind of on a trajectory where you're getting them on an upwards peak. The example he used is Laji Ramazani. He said that Laji Ramazani is a player who would tend to score 5 to 6 goals per season, and they believed that he was on the verge of becoming a 10 to 15 goal player a season. And that's why they then went in for him and went, okay, this is the right amount of money. He can do a great job for us in multiple positions, and he's on that verge of taking that next step to becoming a really good player, which then is really, really good scouting. If that comes good, that is the kind of thing you want to be scouting for. So that's great. That's good, that sort of thing. The other thing is that he said that the reason why a lot of the business happened towards the end of the window is because we were trying to make ambitious moves for people like Ramazani, for people like, who else did we bring in? Altanaka, for example, any of these players. The reason that we waited so late in the window is because a lot of these players, if they're wanting a move that summer, they tend to wait to see if any big clubs come in from in the top 5 leagues. And if they don't, they then start to look at their other options, which then becomes people like Leeds, who will pay them a decent wage in the Championship with the potential of them becoming Premier League players. So that's why a lot of it happens later on in the window, because the players themselves and their agents are waiting for a bigger move. And if it doesn't come and this still looks like a good move for them, they'll then take it. So yeah, look, I mean, it kind of puts into perspective where we are, doesn't it? A lot of this transfer business stuff. Like, we are in the Championship. We are pretty stuck in terms of what we can do with attracting players. All we can do is sell them an overall project. But if somebody in the Premier League, even a Bournemouth or somebody of that ilk in the Premier League, offers them a deal, they're going to take it because they get to play Premier League football. And so realistically, all we can do is try and get back to the Premier League. I also kind of feel that he was basically saying that they have complete trust in Farke. They believe that he's the right man for the job. They believe he's a bit of a promotion specialist and that he can do it this season. The interview itself was recorded 3 or 4 days ago, and that was before the Burnley game. So obviously sentiment has changed a little bit in terms of the fan base, because football fans, we're all very fickle, aren't we? We lose a game and then we're instantly on the coach's back. And with that, again, I mean, I made a video about it yesterday. Look, the underlying statistics are there, and this, I'm not here to echo Jesse Marsh, but we are creating enough chances to win games. So down to the players to put the ball in the back of the net now for me. I want to see more of Laji Ramazani. We mentioned him in this video. I want to see so much more of him, because he was brilliant when he came on, not necessarily contributing a massive amount to the game, but the way that he picked up the ball and drove at the opposition was very Jorginho-esque, with a more of a Somerville build, with more of like a Somerville stature and demeanour. So it's a good combination to have, and I want to see more of him, because I think he can be class for us. I think he can be really good at opening up defences, and I think we should have brought him on sooner. But those are my thoughts really on the whole interview. Like I said at the start, make sure you go and support the Square Balls video and the Spotify one as well. Whatever you want to listen to it / watch it on, go and watch the full interview to get more of an in-depth about this. But I wanted to pick out some key points that resonated with me as things that I wanted to kind of discuss and talk about. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching Leeds Lately, and I'll see you in the next one.